All right, thanks for tuning in to the Our Lads Football Network as we talk Tampa Bay Buccaneers football post-draft. And if you haven't had an opportunity yet to order a draft guide, well, here it is. The Our Lads Draft Guide still available, and this is still a great time to get the guide. Just because the draft is already over doesn't mean that this isn't a very valuable tool at this time of year. And sometimes with sporting events lacking on television, you're looking for things to read. Well, here you go. The Our Lads Draft Guide and the Draft Review Guide will also be coming out pretty soon as well. We are going to talk Tampa Bay Bucks football as we did with our draft preview edition with our special guest, David Harrison, writer at BucksNation.com at SB Nation and co-host on the Locked On Bucks podcast. So, David, good to have you talking to us again.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for having me back.
All right, David. So I got to tell you, there's always a team or two every year that when I look at their draft and the players that they selected that happen to be players that I like, that kind of sticks in me, and I follow that team to see how things go later on down the road. But I agreed a lot with what the Bucks did. Really like the players, the top four players specifically. Wirfs, being able to get him at a bargain. We'll talk about him in a minute. Winfield, absolutely love him. Talked about him a lot this season during the college football year for Minnesota, which was one of my sleeper programs. Keyshawn Vaughn, loved him since his breakout bowl performance a couple years ago at Vandy. And since I mentioned Minnesota as my sleeper, of course, I love Tyler Johnson. So really like the Bucks draft, starting with the fact that they were able to land what our lads believed was the top offensive lineman in the draft and being able to get him at 13, even though they had to move up one spot to get him.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs is a big get for the Buccaneers. I mean, I think for most of the mock draft season, it was either Mekhi Becton falling to that fourth tackle spot to the Bucks because, maybe some of the hype wasn't real in the NFL world and all that, or Andrew Thomas, who a lot of people considered kind of that fourth tackle behind those guys. And for me personally, I mean, I'd gotten used to the idea of Andrew Thomas becoming a Buccaneer just because I had seen so many mock drafts sending him to Tampa. But Tristan Wirfs was the guy that, if I had my option to pick the guy that I wanted for the team, it was going to be Tristan. One, because he's got experience on both sides of the line, and that's what the Buccaneers are going to need. In 2020, you expect him. Jason Light's already said they're expecting him to play on the right side. That's what they brought him in for, and he's got experience there. But with Donovan Smith and kind of the future in limbo for him, depending on how he performs moving forward, there may become a time where the Buccaneers need Tristan Wirfs to move over to the left side. So knowing that he's done that before at a collegiate level and done it well speaks well for his future if they do need him to move and being capable to make that happen. And then, like you said, grabbing him at 13, having to trade up one spot, but only giving up a fourth and getting another seventh round draft pick in exchange for it as well. It's more than people want to pay for moving up one spot, but it's well worth the cost if Wirfs makes good on his potential.
After the draft, every team gets an opportunity to, their beat reporters, their press, they can put together these post-draft interviews and try to find out as much as you can about the player, whether it's through the player, through the coach, through the GM. So what was the consensus out there of why Wirfs ended up so enticing to the Bucks, even though they had to use up a couple of picks to move up and get it? But still, whether he was the 13th or the 14th pick, what was the consensus and why he fell that far?
So why he fell, I mean, I think it's just a matter of teams, how heavily they weighed their need for an offensive tackle. And we saw some of the teams ahead of the Buccaneers go ahead and reach and grab that tackle themselves and grab an offensive lineman. Then we saw, one wide receiver go, the quarterbacks obviously getting in there, and then the defensive players. I don't think his slide, if you want to call it that, to 13 is indicative of necessarily his potential. I think you basically have, from my impression, you have basically 15 to maybe 20. If you could probably stretch it to 20 guys that are just kind of genuine day one talent coming into this year's NFL draft. So if you have that amount of first round talent, one of them is going to be pick number 15. You know what I mean? But being pick number 15 out of that top tier, you're still in that top tier. As far as why the Buccaneers targeted Tristan and what Jason Light talked about with bringing him to the team, again, it was that versatility. I mean, this team since Bruce Arians came in, versatility is kind of just that's the buzzword. Like if you're out there looking for a prospect or a free agent and they're versatile, they can do more than one thing for your team, then you know the Buccaneers are going to have interest in them. So that versatility was a big thing. But then also, Coach Arians actually kind of talked about, and so did Jason, with everything going on and the delays in potentially getting mini camps underway, getting training camp underway, not getting, not being able to get hands on with these prospects as early as you want. The fact that Tristan Wirfs comes from a pro style offense at Iowa, the fact that he got coaching that is along the lines of pro style, NFL style coaching, and the fact that, they talked about how Iowa likes to do a lot of things in their run blocking and their pass protection that the Buccaneers do. So that similarity and some of the language should help. When we talked to Tristan, he was actually asked about that very thing as well. And he said that he felt very comfortable because during a lot of these interviews at the combine and then over Zoom conferences a lot or Google Hangouts or whatever, he was able to, they were saying, if I tell you this terminology, what do you think that is? And he was able to translate that terminology. So that education he received in Iowa as a pro style is going to help him in the learning curve, no matter how they are able to prepare.
So so it wasn't necessarily any slant on his game. It was just, and we talked about it. I mean, I talked about it a lot with a lot of different analysts, that the fact is you just didn't know where any of these four tackles were going to go, 1 through 4, what their preferences were, why their preferences were. I was surprised Thomas was the first guy. I didn't think he should have been, but was it a surprise that Gettleman did something that surprised us? I guess not. So that just was one of those things. And I think maybe the reason the Jets preferred Becton was just their own reasoning. I know there's a little bit of a thing going on there regionally with both guys. Joe Douglas being from the same area Becton's from. I know that's not the reason he picked them, but you just don't know how these general managers are going to react towards why they like or dislike a certain player. But Wirfs is a fantastic talent. The Bucs got a big bargain by getting him. And I remember we talked before the draft about how it wasn't 100% necessity the Bucs had to go out there and get themselves a right tackle right away. And Haig was brought in. And if Haig started and starts day one at right tackle, it's at the end of the world. But if they can get somebody to start at right tackle and make Haig more as a valuable veteran backup, that would be the best case scenario. And so it really turned out perfectly for Tampa Bay to be able to bring in Wirfs. I'm sure he's going to start right away. And the depth now on the offensive line is a lot better than it has been in recent years.
Yeah, most definitely. And, depending on how things go, I mean, nobody can really predict that future, especially, how it pertains to sports getting back up and running. If they end up with an abbreviated training camp preseason process to try to get the season going faster, maybe Joe Haig has to start the first game or two while Tristan continues to get up to speed. And that's something that Bruce Arians has been big on just since he got to Tampa. I'm sure while he was in Arizona, is he's not going to push any of these guys onto the field until they're ready. So if a shortened training session leads to Tristan having to sit out a couple games or back up a couple games while he gets up to speed, then so be it. But at the end of the day, I think they got the guy that they're going to secure the right side of their offensive line with, and it's going to help them in 2020 at some point, and then into the future as his career moves past, we assume anyway, the Tom Brady career.
Okay, and then Antoine Winfield was taken in the second round, and as I said, love the guy. I mean, he is just a playmaker. Bottom line, you just know he's got great athleticism, great ball skills. He was going to be projected to be a second, third round guy, so I think he went pretty much where I suspected he was going to go. And we talked about, matter of fact, I had mentioned that I thought safety was the number one need for Tampa Bay going into the draft. And for them to get Antoine Winfield in round 2, I think that's a great pickup.
Yeah, Antoine Winfield Jr. is a great player, just a very versatile. Again, there's that word, versatile safety, who can play. He can play in the slot. He can play, as a deep cover safety. He can tackle when called upon to do so. He is a little bit smaller. He was asked about that in his interview with the media after he was picked, and I loved his answer. He said, "I've been small my entire life. This isn't anything new to me." So he's been successful despite that fact, and the fact that he's been able to complete his collegiate career being healthy after having so many injuries happen early in his career is a big plus for him. A lot of people, I mean, coming into the second round, like I think pretty much every person that's active on social media concerning the Bucks was targeting a running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire going there at the end of the first round was kind of a big blow to everybody who wanted him in Tampa. And then you see Jonathan Taylor going, and then by the time the Bucks get on the clock, you got J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers, both on the board. Both are guys that Buccaneers fans have kind of been pining over. The Bucks media has been kind of profiling and highlighting. I myself was kind of a champion of J.K. Dobbins joining the team. And I just remember on draft day sitting there thinking, we're all tweeting about running backs, so they're not going to go running back. That's basically how this is going to go.
Right.
And then Antoine Winfield's name comes across the ticker. And I mean, listen, you can't argue the pick. If anybody is upset about the pick, if you want to call it that, it's because they wanted a running back more than they wanted a safety. But again, you look at the evaluation of the team, it's really just how you view, like you said, you viewed safety as a bigger need because you see guys like Andrew Adams, Mike Edwards, Justin Evans, who hasn't played in a long time, as a bigger hole than having a guy like Rojo who showed so much potential in 2019. And obviously the Buccaneers agreed going out there and getting who we expect to be either a starting free safety or taking that starting spot in the slot. I feel like they're going to use that versatility. And, when the defense calls on, they'll use him as kind of a single high safety who's able to crash the box when need be. But when the offense tries to spread him out, they'll put him in the slot. And a guy like Andrew Adams, who was a very serviceable free safety last year, can play up there while Winfield locks down the slot.
And speaking of running backs, the Bucks went running back with Keyshawn Vaughn in the third round. And as I mentioned at the open, he really stood out to me towards the end of the 2018 season, that final game, that bowl game. He went just crazy in that game. And I was like, wow, this kid's a talent. I thought there was a possibility he was going to come out. But he's one of those players, I think, that, and we see it a lot, that had a better year in 2018 than 2019. And so because of that, people kind of may perceive him differently. But that's not how scouts perceive certain players, nor should they. They look back at what kind of a player he was and how great he looked when Vanderbilt was a better team the year before. And I know he's a small guy, but maybe this also says something about their confidence in Ronald Jones. And I mean, it's not like Brady hasn't had like these workhorse Dylan types in a while. He's had a lot of the James White guys that are good at a lot of little things, a lot of different roles, including, of course, pass receiving. And I know we talked about Jones and his ability and how much better he looked last year. But Vaughn, I still think makes a lot of sense. I think he's an underrated player that the Bucks fans will enjoy. And then the Bucks also went running back / kick returner with Raymond Calais, who's 7th round pick, Sun Belt. But this kid is a playmaker. Just because he's a playmaker in the Sun Belt doesn't mean he can't do it in the NFL.
Oh, most definitely. And I mean, yeah, that the example you use with Tom Brady's history and a Tom Brady-led offense being able to be successful and put up points without having kind of a marquee or even a bell cow running back is a great example. And Keyshawn Vaughn is a guy that, I mean, a lot of Bucks fans didn't know who he was. A lot of Bucks media really didn't look at him. When you talk about the top 4 offensive tackles, I think surrounding the Buccaneers, you had the top 5 running backs with the normal names, and then Cam Akers filling in that 5th slot. After him, there really wasn't a name that most people talked about. There was a couple, LaMichael Pirine from Florida was kind of a late round guy, Eno Benjamin too. But that middle group, that kind of 3rd to 5th round group of running backs, nobody really was talking about them because the assumption was they were going to go running back earlier than that or at the very end of the draft like they did with Raymond Calais. Keyshawn Vaughn, after the pick was made, I think we all kind of started diving into our homework. I was actually able to get Vanderbilt running back coach Tim Horton on my show and talk to him about Keyshawn and got a lot of insight about him there. And you mentioned it statistically, and Coach Horton even said it himself, 2018 was a better season for Vaughn than 2019 was when Coach Horton joined the team. And there's a variety of reasons for why that happened. But I think functionally, as far as Vaughn's skill set, I think maybe he actually got a little bit better as a player in 2019, even though the statistics didn't show that. His pass blocking improved in 2019 from a functional standpoint. His contribution to the passing game at Vanderbilt increased. He had a really big one. I want to say it was against Missouri, where they were able to upset one of the top 25 ranked teams at the time. He had a huge catch and run on that play and just kind of showed that second gear that he does have, because, a lot of people don't look at him as a burner, and he's not, but he does have a little bit of a gear to separate from defenders if they underestimate him. So the more I see about Vaughn, the more I like media, or seeing him on the media conference. Great personality kid who has confidence. He called himself the best back in the class, so he's definitely got the confidence, but it didn't come out as cockiness, or almost like defiantly confident. You know what I mean? It was just he has a very professional attitude about him. I'm very excited to see what he can do. And then Raymond Calais, I mean, more return yards in his collegiate career than offensive output. So that tells you who this guy is.
That's
I mean, and that's what Bruce Arians wanted him for. He called him a joystick player. He's a guy that you throw on the field, you give him the ball, you put some space around him, and you see how many guys he can make miss. So it's going to be very exciting to see what he can do on an NFL field. Buccaneers fans have been pining for a return specialist that could do something for a long, long time. TJ Logan was brought in last year by Bruce Arians and his staff to try to be that guy. It didn't really pan out. So my prediction, honestly, this year is that either TJ Logan or Raymond Calais is making this roster. It's just going to be a matter of who contributes to special teams better.
Yeah, Calais 4.42. Now he's short, which is the reason he lasted the 7th round. But he nearly averaged 8 yards per carry in 2 years as a ball carrier. So I don't care what level, it's Division I football, and that tells you that he's just one of these players that he gets his hands on the ball and he's going to make things happen. So I like the addition, especially with a backfield that was basically Ronald Jones and not a lot else you can completely count on. Now you add both potentially Calais, if he does make the team, which I believe he will, and Keyshawn Vaughn. Now Tyler Johnson went in the 5th round, and I know Tyler Johnson is 40 time, not so good, but if you take the 40 time out, just watch Tyler Johnson play this past season. The guy was outstanding. He was one of the main reasons. I put him right there, maybe top 2 reasons why Minnesota had such a great year. He was fantastic. He came up with big play, big catch especially against Penn State, the biggest game that they had in Minnesota in I don't know how long. And some people thought he was going to go maybe 6th round because of his time speed. So he went about where I thought he was going to go. And you know what? His talents say maybe he's even going to be better than that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. This is my favorite pick from a value standpoint. I think Tyler Johnson in the 5th round has the potential to bring back the biggest return on investment of anybody in this class. I've seen some pro comps of Stephon Diggs. I think Diggs is a little bit faster, a little bit more dynamic than Johnson, but there are some similarities in size and in speed. And I mean, both of them are Big Ten wide receivers drafted in the 5th round. So if Tyler Johnson can even kind of sniff at what Stephon Diggs has been able to do in his career, then the Buccaneers definitely got themselves a superhero on day 3. Bruce Arians was really excited about this pick, told us that he was shaking as the pick was starting to come up because he was nervous that somebody was going to swoop in and scoop him away from him. It happened last year when the Pittsburgh Steelers drafted Deontay Johnson right in front of the Bucs, the guy that they were targeting. So this year they got their guy. Some Bucs fans and some Bucs media guys have compared him to Chris Godwin, call him Chris Godwin light. And I mean, that's something too that, this team has been able to take advantage of. And I think at the end of the day, he's a guy who can win early in his route. He can get some early separation. Again, he's not a burner, but that early separation with a quarterback like Tom Brady, putting the ball in the money when he needs to fit it in tight spots, Tyler Johnson has shown that he can make catches through contact. So as long as that ability stays as the NFL contact comes, because, we all know it's a little bit different, but again, playing in the Big Ten, he's playing against future NFL linebackers,
right,
every once in a while. So he's taking some of those hits from NFL safeties and corners while making some of these catches. And first Minnesota Golden Gophers wide receiver drafted since Eric Decker. So if they get anything like Eric Decker, anything like Stephon Diggs, anything like Chris Godwin, Tyler Johnson's got a bright future ahead of him. But he's also got a whole lot of hype surrounding him, honestly, with all these comps. But I like him. I like what he had to say. Again, just very kind of cool, calm, collected, very business-like. Said that he and Antoine both had already talked by the time we spoke to him, and that, celebrating getting drafted, they're going to the NFL. That's great, but now it's time to get to work, and they're looking forward to getting with the team.
All right, and then the last 2 picks were rounds 6 and 7. The team took a couple of defensive players, Khalil Davis, the defensive lineman in round 6 from Nebraska, and Chappelle Russell, the linebacker from Temple, in round 7. Usually when you get down here, especially Russell and maybe Davis, you're looking at guys that got to make the team in special teams ways. But out of those 2 picks, who do you give a better chance to make the team and why?
I would probably give the edge to Khalil Davis to make the team just because the Buccaneers are a little bit thinner on the defensive line than they are in the linebacker room. But Chappelle Russell has definitely has some upside. These two guys, honestly, are probably the best, my favorite stories from draft weekend for the Buccaneers. Khalil Davis, a twin, his brother Carlos Davis also played at Nebraska, was also drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they're a couple of twins who were given up for adoption very early in life, got adopted by the same family, and have been raised by them and grew up with them. Very community oriented. Khalil actually studied for like child services, stuff like that. Does a lot of work in the community. Says he's going to continue to do so as an NFL player. So just very about giving and about others. He's going to be playing behind guys like Will Golston and Dominican Sue. Playing on the same line as Vita Vea. They've got a great defensive line coaching staff there. So he's definitely going to have some of the best education he can get in the National Football League. He's all speed right now, very little power, at least NFL power, I would say. So if he can learn to convert some of that speed to power, get a little bit heavier, get a little bit of a better anchor on that defensive line, I think that he's a guy who's definitely got upside. And then because of the depth or the lack of depth, I would say, on the defensive line right now for the Buccaneers, he's definitely got a shot. Chappelle Russell's another guy. I mean, this guy tore the ACL in his right knee twice in his collegiate career, and when he was asked about kind of that adversity, he said that adversity is nothing to what compared to what he went through before he ever even made it to college. And as he was going through rehab for his knee, he's saying, with everything else I've already been through and overcome to make it to the collegiate level, this is nothing. And that attitude is just kind of exactly what you want, because you're going to get dinged up, you're going to get bruised and hurt in the NFL level. So to have a player who can take those in stride and continue pushing forward is just great. Again, both of them are potential. They're special teams contributors, probably, like you said, upside, and we'll see what turns out of them. But two great guys that you definitely root for just from a human being standpoint.
In the write-up for Khalil Davis, first of all, he's a 4th-round grade, so to get him in the 6th round, that is a nice pickup there. What stands up here is he's a plus athlete with rare speed and pop for the position and has experience lining up inside the tackle and outside the tight end. Won the team's Defensive Lineman of the Year award the past 2 years. So not bad to get a player of that caliber in round 6. And by the way, Russell was a 7th-round grade. Yet we take a look at some key rookie free agents the team picked up, especially at linebacker. And you have Cam Gill from Wagner was a 6th-round grade, and Michael Divinity, the linebacker from LSU, was a 5th-round grade. So you got a couple of linebackers as free agents in Divinity and Gill that actually our lads believe were better graded players than even Russell, who was picked up in the 7th round. It happens a lot, especially in the 7th round. But just to be able to get some gradable players, some more depth players at linebacker, it seems like they picked up a couple of good ones, including Divinity.
Oh, most definitely. I think Michael Divinity Jr. probably was the favorite among those two. Cam Gill is a guy who stood out at the Shrine Bowl. 9.5 sacks in 2019. He was an FCS finalist to be their best defensive player of the year. So definitely a guy who's got an accomplished collegiate career and definitely has some upside. But Michael Divinity Jr., there are a lot of LSU fans among the Bucks fan base. And I mean, national championship winning team. So of course everybody's going to know his name. But again, that versatility that the Buccaneers look for in a draft pick or in a free agent, whoever, Michael Divinity brings that. He's got experience as an inside linebacker. He's got experience as a rush linebacker, and he's done both of them well. Average athlete, I think Chappelle Russell, the reason he gets drafted in the 7th and Michael Divinity gets signed as an undrafted free agent is he's got a better athletic upside than Divinity does, but okay. Divinity's got that, he's got that pedigree. I mean, he played at LSU, he played in the SEC, played big time football. So that experience is going to help him when he gets to the NFL. But he's going to have to make do with the average athleticism and really become a big time student of the game and understand how to read the game better, because he's not going to be able to rely on just reaction alone. Whereas a guy like Chappelle Russell, as he gets used to the NFL level of play, I mean, don't get me wrong, he didn't play in the FCS himself. He did play, big time college football, just not SEC football. But he's going to be able to lean on some of the athleticism. If he gets caught kind of out of place, he'll have the athleticism to recover a little bit better than a Michael Divinity Jr. would. So I think that's what probably the difference between the 7th round pick and the undrafted free agent. Okay. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of competition for those backup spots. And, so good luck to all those guys, but it's going to be a fun battle to watch.
And the player that might have been one of the top rookie free agents in the entire NFL was Parnell Motley, the corner from
Mhm.
Oklahoma, who the Bucs signed a 4th-round grade to Motley, a 3-year starter at Oklahoma, who's immediately going to be a big-time performer on special teams. And he does that early on in preseason. That'll be his calling card to get on the field.
Yeah, I mean the Buccaneers, they've kind of got their nucleus, or whatever you want to call it, of cornerbacks that you pretty much guarantee are going to make the team, barring injury, of course. You got Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, and Sean Murphy Bunting. But after that, you've got MJ Stewart, who was a safety who converted to corner, really doesn't have a strong place on the team. Most expect him not to last through this training camp. And then you've got Ryan Smith, who is a cornerback, but he's really the limited opportunity he's had on the field to play defense has not gone well. He's made his money on special teams. There are some other younger guys who could always surprise, but Parnell Motley is a guy I have to believe in the draft room that every round after Tyler Johnson was picked, so in the 6th and the 7th round, as they're coming around, the Buccaneers are seeing Parnell Motley still on the board, surprised, and essentially they just didn't have the need at cornerback that they did on the defensive line at linebacker. So that's probably why Motley continued to slide, at least on the Buccaneers board. But then, yeah, as soon as he got picked up as an undrafted free agent, that was one of the biggest Twitter reactions, was Parnell Motley going undrafted and then being signed by the Bucs. Definitely has a shot at making this team because of those flaws in the other guys like MJ Stewart and Ryan Smith. I feel like Ryan Smith is going to stick with the team just because he does bring so much value as a gunner and a cover guy on special teams. With Parnell Motley, I think he unseats MJ Stewart, and that's probably your top 5 corners right now, if I had to make a prediction, in May.
All right, and then wrapping it up, a couple of other players of note, rookie free agents. John Mulch, a guard from Boise State, had a 6th-round grade as far as our lads was concerned. So again, getting him to sign him was nice. And wide receiver from Jacksonville State you like as well.
Yeah, John Molchon, he's a first-team All-Mountain West guy, 2018, 2019. Again, not SEC football, but still to be all-conference first team, 2 years running, 3-year starter at Boise State. So there's some experience there. So there's some leadership value you have to imagine there. So the Buccaneers' offensive line depth was atrocious last year. It looks much better this year with the drafting, with the guys they drafted, with the guys they signed, and now with some of the undrafted guys. I think their depth is definitely looking a lot better than it was in 2019. And then, yeah, Josh Pearson out of Jacksonville State, FCS All-American, school record holder for career touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, and touchdowns in a season. He had 30 for his career, 17 in a single season. The guy is 6'3", ran a 4.45 40 at his pro day. Granted, that's hand time, not digital, but take it with a grain of salt. But when you're running that fast at that height as a wide receiver, and you can haul in scoring passes, I mean that's good at any level. So what he will be able to do in the NFL is obviously to be seen. But the Buccaneers, they've got a solid top heavy group of wide receivers, I would say. Obviously, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin not going anywhere. Tyler Johnson, you expect to come in and compete for that 3rd spot, if not grab that 3rd spot. Scotty Miller is a guy that they really like, who showed some good things, was injured in training camp, then injured again during the season. So we'll see how he can come back from all those things. Justin Watson's guy who's Ivy Leaguer, who's had some upside, but he just kind of hasn't really been able to gain traction in the NFL, at least not with the Bucs so far. So I think that's kind of where Josh Pearson's sweet spot is maybe nabbing that 5th job from the Buccaneers, if he can contribute on special teams especially. But if he can turn that height and that speed into production, then I think he's actually got a shot at making the roster.
David, great job as always. We'll be talking to you sometime, hopefully, of course, before training camp, whenever that is. But we've got our fingers crossed that they're going to start either on time or not too much further along than people are guessing could happen. But we'll talk to you then. You've got your Bucs podcast, Locked On Podcast. When are you doing that?
So Locked On Bucs podcast drops 5 days a week. Every Monday through Friday, we've got a new episode. This week coming up, we're doing our divisional crossover with the AFC West teams. That's who the NFC South drew. So Monday through Thursday, we'll have another host from an AFC West team show on our show to talk about the rosters, compare and contrast, and then make some on-paper predictions on who would win those games. And then moving forward, we'll have another divisional crossover with the NFC South host, talk about how the NFC South looks post-draft, undrafted free agency, that second wave of free agency. Of course, Jameis Winston joining the Saints is going to be a hot topic. So we'll talk about all that kind of stuff. And then just like everybody else, just hoping to get back to normal and hoping to get all these things underway sooner rather than later.
Agreed. Thanks, David. David Harrison, SB Nation, Bucks Nation here, talking Bucks football after the draft. Look forward to talking to you again sometime soon, David. Thanks a lot.
Definitely. Thanks, Greg.